When we think about bees, we usually think environment, right? But what if I told you their disappearance is really an economic story? A massive one. Let's really dig into the high stakes role of pollination and figure out what happens when that buzzing just stops.
Okay, let's just start with a number. A huge one. $577 billion. That right there is the estimated value bees add to the global economy every single year. I mean, that's just a staggering figure, and it's basically the foundation of our entire agricultural system. So what actually happens if that cornerstone, that linchpin of our economy and ecosystem, just disappears? Well, the fallout is way faster and way more widespread than you'd probably guess. And we're not talking about some slow, gradual decline here. Nope, it'd be a rapid, catastrophic domino effect, toppling everything from our food supply and economies to the natural world itself. All right, first up, the 577 billion sting. Let's dive back into that number, $577 billion. Because losing our bees isn't just some sad story for nature lovers, it's a massive economic shockwave just waiting to hit. The scale of our dependence on these little guys is it's mind-boggling. Bees are responsible for pollinating about 75%, three-quarters of the world's leading food crops. So think about it like this. 3 out of every 4 bites of food you eat? Yeah, you can thank a pollinator for that. And which foods are we talking about? Which ones are most at risk? Well, we're talking about some of our favorites, the high-value, nutrient-packed staples like avocados, coffee, apples, berries, the good stuff. And then you've got almonds. They're basically 100% dependent on bee pollination. It's really that simple. No bees, no almonds. Period. Okay, next section, the global food shock. This massive dependency, well, it leads us straight to the next domino to fall. A huge, immediate, global food shock. This is where all that economic theory stops being theory and hits our dinner plates hard. Without bees, the yields for these crops, the ones that need pollinators, they would absolutely plummet. And we're not talking a small dip either. We're talking a catastrophic failure in production for foods we literally eat every single day. The economic fallout from that is pretty easy to predict, and honestly, it's devastating. Supply collapses, so what happens? Prices go through the roof. That kind of food inflation creates incredible scarcity. And you know who gets hit the hardest? The world's most vulnerable populations. It just makes malnutrition and inequality so much worse. But, the cost here isn't just about money. That number, 1.4 million, that's how many additional deaths per year are projected globally from diet-related illnesses, all because we lose these nutrient-rich foods packed with things like vitamins A and C, calcium, and folate. And believe it or not, the crisis doesn't even stop in the produce aisle, because a lot of essential animal feed, things like alfalfa and clover, they also depend on pollinators. So if they disappear, the cost of feeding livestock goes way up, and suddenly milk, cheese, and meat become a lot more expensive for everyone. All right, let's talk about nature's domino effect. So far, we've mostly been talking about farms and food, right? But the impact goes way beyond agriculture. Losing bees would kick off a chain reaction that could literally unravel entire ecosystems. And to really get why, you've got to understand this concept, keystone species. Bees are like the textbook example of this. Think of them as the linchpin holding a whole structure together. You pull them out and the entire system it changes drastically. So here's how that collapse would actually play out, step by step. First, our keystone pollinator, the bee, vanishes. Without him, over 80% of wild-flowering plants can't reproduce. The entire landscape just starts to change. That kicks off step 3. The herbivores, the plant eaters that depend on those plants, they start to starve. And as their numbers drop, so do the predators that hunt them. You see, the whole food web just unravels from the bottom up. At the end of the day, this massive loss of biodiversity makes our natural world incredibly fragile. These weakened ecosystems, they become way more vulnerable to other big shocks, stuff like climate change, wildfires, and desertification. Okay, so a warning from Sichuan, China. Now, I know this might all sound kind of hypothetical, like a sci-fi movie or something, but it's not. We actually have a stark, real-world warning of what this future looks like, and it comes from Sichuan, China. See, in parts of that province, years of deforestation and heavy pesticide use just completely decimated the local bee populations, and it forced them into this really dramatic and totally unsustainable solution.
Farmers there right now have to pollinate their apple and pear orchards by hand. And when you compare that to what bees do, the difference is just, it's wild. What bees do for free, it takes up to 40 people per hectare to replicate, it costs about $19 per tree, and even then you get worse fruit with lower yields. I mean, obviously, this is not a viable long-term solution. It's a huge warning sign for the whole world that trying to replace what nature gives us for free comes at an absolutely impossible price, both financially and for the environment. All right, final section, a world without honey. So, beyond the insane economic and ecological costs, there's one more loss we have to talk about. It's a bit more personal. It's about losing our shared culture.
Just think about this one phrase: a land flowing with milk and honey. For thousands of years, honey hasn't just been food. It's been this incredibly powerful symbol of abundance, of prosperity, even of the divine in so many cultures. I mean, you look back through history. The ancient Egyptians offered it to their gods. The Greeks and Romans saw it as a divine gift. In traditional healing systems like Ayurveda, it's a core medicine. Losing honey isn't just losing a sweetener. It's like cutting a thread that's been woven through thousands and thousands of years of human history. So, when you pull it all together, it becomes so clear. Protecting bees isn't just some niche environmental issue. It's a strategic imperative. It's essential for our food, for our economy, and yeah, for our culture too. It's not an exaggeration to say that their tiny wings really do support our world. Our fate is completely intertwined with theirs. And that leaves us with one final, pretty sobering question to think about. What actually happens when the last bee flies?